Welcome to Not This Week, where nothing newsworthy ever happened. No headlines, no breaking scoops, just the things that never happened.
Not This Week, week number 38, Middle East Special Edition. Picture this: Benjamin Netanyahu, teary-eyed, live on air, clutching a box of tissues, saying, "Sorry, Qatar, we shouldn't have done that." Didn't happen. Instead, the silence was deafening, the apologies absent, and Doha had to add diplomatic apology to its growing list of unfulfilled imports, right next to rainfall and humility. Welcome to Not This Week, where the headlines aren't about what happened, but about what stubbornly refused to. Today, we explore apologies never made, rivals barely acknowledged, and nukes that are still proudly gathering dust in bunkers. Buckle up, because in this edition, the absence is the headline. Because sometimes the most revealing story isn't the bomb that dropped, but the apology that didn't. Not the declaration that was made, but the silence that followed. Not the bold disarmament, but the stubborn insistence that we need these bombs for reasons. This edition, we're traveling from Doha to Islamabad, from nuclear bunkers to diplomatic podiums, peeling back the layers of irony that keep international relations more absurd than a reality show. We'll start with Netanyahu's apology that never came, then look at Pakistan's curious, not mentioning yet mentioning India moment, and finally examine why Pakistan's nukes remain the one household item nobody's willing to throw away. Grab your tea, your karak, or your overpriced oat latte, and let's dive into the world's most fascinating non-events. Netanyahu's non-apology to Qatar. Imagine the Israeli prime minister walking up to a podium, bowing his head and saying, "To the state of Qatar, we deeply regret the violation of your sovereignty. We will compensate your losses, respect your mediation role, and maybe even let your football team score next time." That would have been the diplomatic equivalent of pigs flying over Tel Aviv. Because in reality, Netanyahu said no such thing. No tear-soaked apology, no symbolic bouquet sent to Doha, not even a passive-aggressive, "sorry you feel that way." Qatar, the self-styled Switzerland of the Middle East, has spent decades hosting negotiations, peace talks, and awkward photo ops. They hosted the Taliban, they hosted the World Cup, they probably host the region's best collection of peace process PowerPoints. And yet, when Doha itself got hit, the response from Israel was silence, or worse, justification. Why? Because in the unwritten code of geopolitics, apologizing is weakness. And for Netanyahu, weakness is like bad hummus. Unthinkable, even if everyone secretly knows it happens. An apology would have made him look conciliatory, even remorseful, and his coalition partners would sooner eat pork sausages than forgive him for that. This matters because the non-apology sends a message louder than words. In this game, sovereignty is negotiable, and Qatar's decades of mediation don't buy immunity. It shows the pecking order. The strong do, the small absorb, and apologies are for weddings, not wars. Pakistan admits India never asked for mediation. For decades, Pakistan has treated international forums as open mic night for India jokes. Every speech, every summit, every op-ed had at least one dig. And yet, in a recent interview with Al Jazeera, Pakistan's Deputy PM and Foreign Minister Ishaq Dar admitted something extraordinary. India has categorically been stating it's a bilateral matter, meaning India never asked for outside mediation, never invited a third-party referee. Wait, what? Did Islamabad just echo Delhi's line? Somewhere in South Block, Indian officials probably replayed the clip twice to make sure their ears weren't hallucinating. Let's be clear, Pakistan didn't ignore India. It didn't erase the elephant in the room, but it did something more shocking. It acknowledged reality. No cries for UN intervention, no begging Washington to babysit, just a reluctant tip of the hat to India's stance. Why does this matter? Because in South Asia, admitting your rival's position is practically sacrilege. It's like Coke admitting Pepsi tastes fine. It doesn't happen. But here it was, a rare diplomatic slip of honesty. The satire writes itself. Pakistan, normally allergic to agreeing with India, suddenly found itself in sync, if only on this narrow point. It's less non-mention and more non-demand. The absence wasn't India's name, but the absence of escalation. And for the record, India noticed. They didn't celebrate, of course. They quietly filed it away, knowing full well that one day later, Pakistan might return to its usual rhetorical fireworks. But for one brief Al Jazeera interview, the script changed, and that absence of drama was the real drama. Pakistan doesn't announce nuclear disarmament, but talks tough. Now let's move from words to warheads. Imagine Islamabad holding a press conference. Ladies and gentlemen, after careful reflection, we've decided nuclear weapons are overrated. We're handing them over to the IAEA, and as a bonus, we're turning the uranium into jewelry. Peace bracelets, anyone? Didn't happen. What did happen is telling. India's Defense Minister Rajnath Singh suggested Pakistan's arsenal should come under IAEA oversight. Pakistan dismissed that as irresponsible, insisting its nukes are safe, reliable, and untouchable. Military leaders like Field Marshal Asim Munir rattled sabers, promising full-spectrum response and even hinting at striking infrastructure if provoked. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif tried damage control, clarifying the nukes are defensive, not for aggression, and that there was no intent to escalate during Operation Sindoor. So no, there was no nuclear disarmament, no Nobel Prize moment. Instead, there was a tug-of-war between swagger and reassurance. Islamabad clung to its deterrent like a family heirloom, too dangerous to use, too precious to part with. Why does this matter? Because the non-event, no disarmament, isn't just inertia, it's policy. Nuclear weapons are Pakistan's insurance policy against irrelevance. And while the world keeps fantasizing about rollback, the truth is simpler. Nobody wants to be the first to Marie Kondo their warheads. The satire? Pakistan's nukes are like a pet tiger. Don't worry, it's only for protection. Meanwhile, the neighbors are building bunkers just in case. The world suddenly becomes a nice place where everyone gets along. Imagine a breaking news alert. World leaders agree to hug it out. Trump and Xi doing the cha-cha on TikTok, Putin and Zelensky co-authoring a cookbook, Israel and Hamas co-sponsoring a TED Talk on forgiveness. Didn't happen. Instead, the world carried on as usual. Strikes, sanctions, summits, and a polite sprinkling of grave concern statements. If humanity ever wanted to cosplay as one big happy family, this was not the edition. Why does this matter? Because peace doesn't pay. Harmony is bad for defense budgets, bad for arms dealers, bad for cable news ratings. Conflict, however, is the subscription service no one cancels. So yes, the world didn't suddenly hold hands. Instead, leaders went back to their corners, threw more diplomatic shade, and reminded us that global unity remains permanently out of stock. An international relations expert predicts the global order is not changing. Here's a headline you didn't see. Top expert says West totally secure, nothing to worry about. No IR scholar popped up on Al Jazeera or CNN to reassure us that the global South is just going through a phase and the West's monopoly is intact. Because let's face it, no serious analyst is betting on the status quo anymore. BRICS is holding flashy summits, Gulf states are rewriting energy politics, and Africa is flexing new diplomatic muscles. The center of gravity is shifting, whether the West likes it or not. Why does this matter? Because silence is telling. The absence of status quo forever voices shows the consensus. Change is real, irreversible, and inconvenient. The satire? International relations experts, once the high priests of stability, are now scrambling to publish think pieces with titles like, "What if multipolarity ruins my PowerPoint template?" Saudi Arabia doesn't suspend diplomatic ties with Washington. Picture Riyadh slamming its fist on the table. Enough, we're recalling our ambassador from Washington. The US press corps would faint. Oil markets would skyrocket. Think tank interns would sprout gray hair overnight. But no, the Saudi embassy in DC still flies the flag. No ambassadors were yanked. No consulates shuttered. Why? Because the US-Saudi relationship is the geopolitical version of a messy marriage. Too many shared accounts to ever file for divorce. Washington needs oil stability. Riyadh needs weapons, tech, and political cover. They grumble, they posture, they occasionally leak nasty op-eds, but they never break up. Why it matters? The non-event tells us that despite public spats over human rights, Palestine, and oil production, the alliance remains glued together by pragmatism. Money, arms, and security guarantees trump everything else. The satire? This marriage is basically War of the Roses with F-15s. Qatar doesn't threaten to cut gas exports to Europe. Now imagine this. Doha holds a press conference declaring, "Europe, good luck heating your homes this winter. No gas for you." Brussels would melt down faster than butter on shawarma. But Qatar didn't say that. No embargoes, no tantrums. Europe kept getting LNG shipments, and leaders kept exhaling relief into their central heating vents. Why it matters? Because Qatar had the leverage. After diplomatic tensions and security scares, it could have flexed. Instead, Doha played the long game, sticking to its reputation as a reliable supplier. For Qatar, reputation pays more than retaliation. The satire? Europe lives in perpetual anxiety, praying every night that Doha doesn't sneeze. Qatar knows it and smiles quietly behind the gas meters. Iran doesn't close the Strait of Hormuz. Imagine waking up to headlines. Iran shuts down Strait of Hormuz, global oil market in freefall. Tankers stranded, prices soaring, Europe crying into its espresso cups. Didn't happen. The strait remained open, tankers chugging along as if the world economy weren't one Iranian eyebrow twitch away from chaos. Why it matters? Because Hormuz is the world's oil jugular. A fifth of global crude flows through it. If Iran sneezes here, markets catch pneumonia. And yet, Tehran knows it doesn't need to close the door. Just reminding the world it could is leverage enough. The satire? It's like Iran dangling a do not push button over the global economy. Every ship that sails through is a reminder that the scariest threat is the one never acted upon. Turkey doesn't mediate a breakthrough ceasefire. Now picture Erdogan striding onto a stage in Doha, chest puffed out, announcing, "We have achieved peace." Cameras flash, doves fly, hashtags trend. Didn't happen. No ceasefire, no handshake moment, no Turkish flag rising over diplomacy's Mount Everest. Why it matters? Because Ankara loves playing fixer. Turkey positions itself as the Middle East's locksmith, jingling keys but rarely opening doors. The absence of a breakthrough proves what insiders know. Turkey is too ambitious, too divisive, too Erdogan. The satire? Turkey is like that friend who keeps volunteering to mediate your relationship drama but ends up eating all the snacks instead. The UAE doesn't ban Israeli tech firms overnight. Imagine the UAE suddenly kicking Israeli startups out of Dubai, padlocking offices, canceling visas, and replacing AI labs with falconry centers. Didn't happen. Despite outrage on Arab streets, Abu Dhabi didn't torch its business honeymoon with Tel Aviv. The Abraham Accords remained intact, tech partnerships humming. Why it matters? Because the UAE has branded itself as the Switzerland of business. Neutrality optional, profit mandatory. Dropping Israeli tech would have rattled investor confidence harder than a sandstorm at Expo City. The satire? Public anger might burn flags, but Gulf boardrooms only burn through venture capital. Morality is a nice talking point. Money builds the skyline. OPEC doesn't collapse into public infighting. What if OPEC's Vienna meeting had ended with Saudi storming out, Iran flipping the conference table, and Nigeria live streaming the chaos? Oil prices would have nosedived, CNBC anchors would have cried, and TikTok would have a new hashtag, cartel meltdown. Didn't happen. The facade of unity held. No public split, no rival cartel, just carefully staged smiles for the cameras. Why it matters? Because OPEC's true export isn't oil, it's the illusion of harmony. Behind closed doors, members cheat on quotas like dieters sneaking cake. But in public, they present the image of one big, happy cartel family. The satire? OPEC is basically a reality show where everyone secretly hates each other but signs up for another season anyway. Egypt doesn't open the Rafah crossing without conditions. Imagine Cairo shocking the world by declaring, "The Rafah crossing is open to all Gazans. No restrictions, no paperwork, no fees, just walk through." The footage would have been biblical. Families streaming across, children cheering, aid trucks rolling in without delay. Didn't happen. Rafah stayed what it always is, a political turnstile guarded by Egyptian bureaucracy and Cairo's infinite ability to monetize desperation. Why it matters? Because Egypt loves to posture as Palestine's protector, but the border is really a bargaining chip. Opening it without conditions would have meant losing leverage with Israel, irritating Washington, and giving up one of Cairo's most valuable pressure valves. The satire? Rafah isn't a gate, it's a slot machine. Try your luck, maybe you'll pass. The Arab League doesn't expel any members. Now picture the Arab League taking a bold step, suspending a member for betrayal or kicking out a state for violating shared principles. The shockwaves would ripple from Rabat to Riyadh. Didn't happen. No expulsions, no suspensions, just another round of speeches longer than their impact. Why it matters? Because the Arab League has perfected institutional inertia. It thrives on communiques nobody reads and meetings that solve less than a family WhatsApp group. Expelling someone would require enforcing rules, and rules are the one thing the League avoids like a bad buffet. The satire? It's the only club in the world where membership is for life, no matter how badly you behave. The Arab League is less alliance and more group chat you can't leave. Israel doesn't face sanctions from GCC states. Imagine Gulf leaders announcing coordinated sanctions on Israel. Flights canceled, trade frozen, banks locked out. It would have shaken markets, rattled Tel Aviv, and electrified Arab streets. Didn't happen. GCC states stuck to statements of grave concern, while business ties with Israel continued to hum quietly in the background. Why it matters? Because the gulf between public anger and elite policy has never been wider. Citizens chant in the streets, rulers sign contracts in boardrooms. Sanctions would have meant aligning with outrage. But that costs billions, and skyscrapers don't build themselves. The satire? In the Gulf, moral outrage lasts until the next board meeting. Principles make good press releases, but profits sign the checks. A UN emergency summit doesn't solve anything, and now, the most predictable non-event of all. Imagine a UN emergency summit in New York actually solving something. Delegates vote unanimously, peacekeepers deploy, and diplomats leave the chamber smiling instead of sighing. Didn't happen. The summit convened, speeches dragged on, resolutions diluted themselves into irrelevance. Business as usual. Why it matters? Because the UN's role has long shifted from solving crises to hosting them. It's less a peacekeeper than a conference organizer with better stationery. Every emergency session is déjà vu with more microphones. The satire? The UN is the world's most expensive group therapy session. Everyone talks, nobody heals. Let's pause here. If you've made it this far through 15 global non-events, you deserve a medal, or at least a functioning Wi-Fi connection. So smash that like button the way OPEC smashes quota discipline. Drop a comment telling us which non-event you secretly wish had happened, and don't forget to subscribe. Unlike the UN, we actually follow up on what we promise. And there it is, 15 stories that didn't happen, yet told us more about the world than the ones that did. Netanyahu's missing apology, Pakistan's reluctant nod to India, nuclear weapons still hoarded like doomsday souvenirs, Gulf business ties trumping street anger, and the UN's eternal talent for saying a lot while doing very little. This is the beauty of Not This Week. The absence becomes the story. The silence is the headline. Because sometimes what doesn't happen tells us more about power, hypocrisy, and human stubbornness than the explosions that do. So share this with your most politically obsessed friend, the one who thinks watching summits is a sport. And remember, next time you ask yourself, why didn't they do that? Congratulations, you've just spotted the real headline. This is Not This Week. See you in the next edition.